Salut, I'm Jennifer, your French teacher in the south of France, and I have a question for you. Do you know how to say that you almost did something in French? How do you say almost? Does a word come to mind? Is it not the word that I have here on the screen? Maybe you think presque. If you think presque, don't worry, you are not wrong. We're going to look at presque, but I want to show you such a simple little grammatical construction that's going to make you sound more French, and you're just not going to believe that you didn't know this before. The verb I'm going to show you, the infinitive form is faillir, faillir, and it is a regular IR verb, but you're really mostly going to hear the verb faillir being used in the passé composé to say that someone almost or nearly did something. Now, if you're a beginner and you're like, I don't even know present tense yet, don't even start talking to me about passé composé, don't worry. All you have to know is the verb avoir and a few infinitives. Let me show you how easy this is. I get a lot of my students who are not beginners at all and who tell me, I have never seen this construction. And it's so easy that I have put it into my beginner French course. Do you know what? I teach this construction when I teach the verb avoir in the present tense. So beginners, stick around. Now, the one thing you really absolutely have to know in order to use what I'm going to show you today is how to conjugate the verb avoir in the present tense. If you're not a beginner, then you know how to do this, right? If you are a beginner, learn this. You need the verb avoir all the time, every day. Let's just say it. Why don't you say it right after me? I'll say it and then you repeat the conjugation after me. And remember, the verb avoir means to have. J'ai, tu as, il a, elle a, on a, nous avons, vous avez, ils ont, elles ont. If there's one thing that really brings me joy as a French teacher, it's being able to show my students something that is so easy to use that it just makes them feel like, gosh, I can do that. That really doesn't require much effort. That's what this is. Look, we're just going to start with the subject. Here I've chosen nous, and then you use the present tense of avoir, so nous avons. And then we're going to throw in the word. Remember, what we're saying here is that we, in this case, almost did something, or we nearly did something. So we're going to throw in the word failli. The hardest thing about that is just remembering how to pronounce it. Failli. Failli. So those two L's are going to sound like a Y. Okay, so failli, failli. And then any infinitive you want. Here I've chosen tomber. When I do this, I say nous, I turn it into a sentence. Nous avons failli tomber. It means we almost fell. That's what it means. Now, if you're advanced, you'll notice that this is the passé composé of the verb faillir, and that failli is the past participle of the regular verb faillir, which might be a new verb to you. But anyway, nous avons failli tomber. All you really have to know is the word failli. Who cares about all the grammar? And how to conjugate avoir. Nous avons failli tomber. We almost or we nearly fell down. You see how tomber is in the infinitive form, so the ER is still on it. Now, at the beginning of this lesson, I asked you, how do you say almost? And maybe the word presque came to mind, because presque does mean almost. And I told you that you're not wrong. You can continue to use presque, but I'm going to show you why this avoir failli business is actually easier than using presque. So when you want to say, I almost cried, I nearly cried, avoir in the present tense, j'ai failli pleurer. J'ai failli pleurer. Pleurer is in the infinitive form. Now, hey, if you're just more comfortable with presque, that's cool. I have no problem with you using presque. You'll still sound French. J'ai presque pleuré. But what did I mean when I said it's more complicated to use presque? Well, here we're using, this is the passé composé. We're using avoir as our helping verb. But instead of putting pleurer in the infinitive form, I have to make sure I put the past participle of the verb pleurer. Now, this happens to be a regular verb. Pleurer uses avoir as a helping verb. Easy peasy, no worries. But not all verbs are as easy as pleurer. But if you want to say j'ai presque pleuré, then that still means I almost cried. Just look at how easy this is to do. Tu as failli rater le bus. Tu as failli rater le bus. Rater, infinitive. You almost missed the bus. And with presque, tu as presque raté le bus. Tu as presque raté le bus. Now, raté sounds the same, whether it's an infinitive, raté with an ER, or whether it's a past participle with the E accent aigu. But here we have to remember to put the past participle, which is what makes it a little more complicated. Il a failli dire non. Il a failli dire non. He almost said no. Dire, infinitive. Easy. Il a presque dit non. Il a presque dit non. He almost said no. Now we have to put the verb dire in the past participle form. And this is an irregular verb, so the past participle is dit, dit. So what if you're a beginner and you don't know that? Well, then you can easily just say il a failli dire non. Nous avons failli tomber. We saw this example already, didn't we? But I wanted to show it to you again, and you'll see why in a minute when we use presque. Il a failli tomber. Oh, I'm sorry. Nous avons failli tomber. We almost fell. Tomber, infinitive. This is what I was talking about, why it's more complicated to use presque to say that we almost did something. Nous sommes presque tombés. And we're not using the verb avoir anymore. So that just takes it to another level of complication. You have to know how to use the passé composé to do this. And you have to know that the verb tomber requires the verb être as a helping verb. And you have to know that the past participle needs to agree in number and gender with the subject. Nous sommes presque tombés. It's a great sentence. No worries. But it's not as easy as nous avons failli tomber. And did you want to know something? For once, the one that is easier is actually maybe even more commonly used in everyday French. Now, don't take that to mean that it's slang, because it's not at all. The verb faillir is a very, very good verb to use. Vous avez failli avoir un accident. Vous avez, avoir is conjugated in the present tense as promised. Vous avez failli, and then your infinitive is the whole verb avoir. You can do that. Vous avez failli avoir un accident. Now, in English, it says you almost had an accident. And you might be thinking, okay, well, if it's the infinitive, why doesn't it say have? That's because we can't directly translate sentences using this verb faillir in the passé composé. We don't have a real English equivalent to this where we can just take it word by word. You just have to trust me. Vous avez failli avoir un accident. And here's more proof that presque is more complicated. Vous avez presque eu un accident. Vous avez presque eu un accident. You almost had an accident. What makes it more complicated? Well, you just have to know that the past participle of the verb avoir is eu. And if that's not complicated for you, then bravo, très très bien. I can almost feel you through the screen saying, I'm going to use falloir all the time now when I want to say that something almost happened, because Jennifer's right. This is easier. Elles ont failli être en retard. Elles ont failli être en retard. They were almost late. Être, infinitive. And I can also almost hear you through the screen saying, well, now I have to retrain my brain not to say presque all the time. Yep. You don't have to. I told you that it's not wrong. It's just good to know another way to do it. And if you're a beginner, then I'll bet you're going to do it all the time like this, because elles ont presque été en retard. That's what we have to do if we're using presque. We have to use the past participle of the verb être, which is été. D'accord? Elles ont presque été en retard. They were almost late. So, which do you prefer? Do you prefer going with the nous avons failli tomber? Or do you prefer saying nous avons presque tombé? Which method do you think is going to work better for you? Because whichever method works better for you is the one that you're likely going to use. And they're both good. Let me know in the comments whether you are watching this within my French course for self-learners, or perhaps you're watching it on YouTube. I want to know which one you like the most and which one you think you're more likely to use. I want to know if you think you're going to have to retrain your brain if all you've ever used in the past has been presque. D'accord? If you want to know more about my French course for self-learners, then I invite you to click on the link in the video description. Merci beaucoup et à bientôt.